It's Wednesday, November 19, 2025, and I'm tracking a few weather systems across the US and some big time cold air building in across North America that'll make its way into the lower 48 next week. So, as we take a look at the long term forecast, heading into Thanksgiving, we will see above average temperatures for a good portion of the eastern half of the US, specifically down in the southeast, where you could see well above average temperatures. Meanwhile, things will be turning cooler across the northwest as another weather system heads into that area. And as that system that is across the northwest pushes eastward and south, it will drag in some really cold air across parts of the northwest, and that'll eventually filter in across much of the country, where we could see temperatures dip as cold as 20 to 30 degrees below average temperatures working into the end of November and into early December. So this will be a substantial cool down on the way, and it will include places like the southeast, which, at least in this forecast going into early December, does not have the cold air getting there quite yet. But I do think the first few days of December will start to feel some of that colder air, even as far south as places like Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, as things really start to cool down here. As we take a look at the jet streams forecast, we will eventually see a trough build out west as we head through the next few days. We also have a ridge in the forecast for much of the eastern half of the U.S. That's why we will see above average temperatures. And you can see that here going through the 24th, 5th, and 6th, and then a dip in the jet stream coming between the 26th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. So right there is where we'll see a big drop in temperature across much of the U.S. as that cold air filters in, and then a secondary trough will form behind this going into the first week of December, and that's where you could see a reinforcement of cold air and potentially more snow in the forecast. So here's that temperature forecast through the next few days. You can see the yellows and oranges pushing through much of the Midwest and plains. So we will see temperatures between 40s, 50s, and even 60s in the forecast through the upper Midwest, 60s and 70s to the lower Midwest, and then pushing to the 27th, 8th, and 9th. Here comes the cold air, where we will see those 20s, which is the pink color there, stretching all the way into the Northeast, through the Midwest, even as far south potentially as Tennessee, Kentucky, and even North Carolina and Virginia, seeing those temperatures in the 20s and 30s, so a big drop in temperature there. But eventually we'll warm things up a couple more days ahead of that secondary reinforcement of cold air, and then it could get even colder heading into the first week of December. And as we look at future radar here, there are a couple weather systems I'll be tracking. Off to the west coast, there will be another weather system moving in with a chance of snow in the forecast and maybe substantial snow, and another weather system that comes in out of Mexico that will produce some heavy rain across parts of the southern plains, maybe even some flooding issues there. And then that system works its way to the northeast, where it will bring some rain and maybe a little bit of snow for parts of northern New England, the higher elevations anyway. And then as we push into next week, so this is Thanksgiving week here, we will see a couple more weather systems in the forecast. One that'll move across the southern plains on the 23rd and 4th. Maybe some stronger storms with this, but at this point doesn't look like the risk is very high. That storm system will head off to the southeast and then eventually work its way a bit more to the north, and will be producing more rain, showers, and storms in the forecast there, but potentially a little bit of snow on the 26th and 7th as that shot of cold air starts to work its way out of Canada. I do think there's a decent chance of some snow accumulation potentially for parts of the Northeast, but right now it's so far out, there's still some uncertainty where that storm is going to go. But I do think there's a decent chance of seeing at least one storm there, but potentially a better chance as we work towards that second shot of cold air on the 28th and 9th. We might see a little bit of snow for parts of the Northeast again. So better chances of seeing snow in parts of the Northeast, the higher elevations, northern New England, northern New York, than not seeing snow at this point. So that's something we'll be tracking over the next few days. Otherwise, it's relatively quiet Thanksgiving forecast across the country. So if you're traveling this upcoming weekend, we're going to track that one storm system. And then next weekend, it'll be a couple weather systems, most likely for the Northeast. So as I mentioned, there is a risk of flash flooding across parts of the southern plains. It's a level 2 out of 4 risk, so not overly high, but definitely concerning as we push into Thursday's forecast. We could see potentially even some flash flooding, so we got to keep an eye on that. And then parts of Southern California could even see some isolated pockets of flooding on already saturated ground in some spots, as we've seen a decent amount of rain over the last few days, if not the last couple of weeks. But we will be tracking both areas as we move into Thursday and even Friday's forecast as well. Here's a look at rainfall totals over the next several days here, where you could see upwards of 4, even 5 inches of rain across parts of the southern plains. That's why there's such a significant concern for that area with a level 2 out of 4 risk for excessive rainfall. and there's a few spots in Southern California there that could reach 2 inches of rain. That can be a lot of rainfall in that area, so that's something of concern as well. In terms of the severe weather risk, we're not really expected to see a whole lot in terms of strong to severe storms. There may be a few of those storms across parts of southern Texas going into today's forecast, and then again on Thursday, but we're not really expected to see a whole lot of widespread severe weather, at least through this week. However, next week, there's a potential of seeing maybe a few severe weather chances as we get that shot of cold air to work its way into the forecast. So that's something we'll be watching as we move into next week, especially towards the end of the week. Well, if you're curious about snow over the next several days, I do think southern Canada is solidly locked in with snow at this point, and the Rockies will see a decent amount of snow through the next 5 to 6 days. As the pattern starts to shift, once we get that colder air in the forecast, you can almost see the snow build across parts of the northern plains and into the Midwest, and then eventually we see the opportunities of snow for the Northeast. Still a general idea of the forecast here. Amounts are not set in stone this far out, but it just gives us an idea of where we could potentially see snow going to next week. I do think there's a decent chance of at least one storm system at the end of the week to interact with the cold air. It could easily still hit parts of the Midwest, but probably a better chance of hitting the Northeast and go up into southeastern Canada. So that's probably our best chance of seeing a significant winter weather system into next week. Meanwhile, if you do live across parts of the Rockies and into the West Coast, you'll see some decent snow in the higher elevations there with storm systems coming this week, but next week you'll start to warm up by the end of the week. And here's that forecast for the Rockies, where you could see substantial snow for parts of Sierra Nevada, upwards of a foot of snow, maybe even 2 feet in some of the higher elevations, and then working our way a bit farther inland towards Utah, parts of Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. Could even see a few locations pick up over a foot of snow, maybe even 2 feet in some of the highest elevations there as well, but better chances of the higher amounts closer to the coast and closer to the Sierra Nevada, and then going up into parts of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, picking up some decent snow as well as a couple weather systems move in. So here's a closer look at the Sierra Nevada. Right around the Lake Tahoe area could pick up easily a foot of snow as this next weather system moves in. And then as we head towards Salt Lake City, parts of Idaho going into Montana and Wyoming, easily 6 inches of snow on some of the higher terrain, 2 to 4 inches on the lower terrain. So not a lot of snow, but you will see some fresh snow on the way. And then we go down to parts of southern Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, and even parts of southwestern Colorado, where we could see upwards of a foot of snow on some of the higher terrain, as you will see a bit more in terms of precipitation down here, but the snow that does fall will probably melt fairly quickly as things warm up going into next week. And a quick look at Colorado, where we could see a decent amount of snow for some of the higher terrain. It's not a blockbuster storm for this area, but we could see several inches of fresh snow, which will add on to some of the totals we've already seen so far this season. So looking ahead, we'll be tracking a few things over the next several days, including a big pattern shift heading into the week of Thanksgiving, where we'll go from well above average temperatures to well below average temperatures in the course of just a few days. And that does include a shot of cold air that will stretch from one side of the country to the other. We'll also be tracking the potential of severe weather as we move into next week, and I'll have a winter weather update as we get closer to the start of the season. And if you like this forecast, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out more of our video forecasts right over here, and I'll see you in the next forecast update.